Morning, everyone. Listen, the American people don't want the president's health care bill, and they don't want the government to shut down. Republicans are listening. We passed a bill last week that would do just what the American people have asked. It's time for the Senate to listen and pass the bill that we sent over there. On the debt limit, we're going to introduce a plan that ties important spending cuts and pro-growth reforms to a debt limit increase. Now, the president says, I'm not going to negotiate. Well, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. We're not going to ignore Washington's spending problem, and we're not going to accept this new normal of a weak economy, no new jobs, and shrinking wages. So we need to strengthen our economy for all Americans, and we need to deal with Washington's spending problem.
Good morning. Speaker said last week we sent the Senate a continuing resolution that funds the government and stops Obamacare before it costs one more job or it costs families of this country one more dollar of discretionary income. And we also talked a lot today about a plan we're going to put forward this week. It is a plan to address the debt ceiling. We have a debt crisis in this nation. I don't think many people have differed with that notion. And we do have a plan to reduce wasteful government spending, which also spurs economic growth. So our plan reduces energy costs for families and businesses. It calls for the reform of our tax code. It reforms Washington spending, and it delays Obamacare for 1 year for all American families. Now, President Obama has already delayed the law for big business, for insurance companies, and the politically connected. So this is only fair for us to say that American families should also have the benefit of delay that this president has given to those. Now, for too long, President Obama and his Democratic colleagues in the Senate have chosen to ignore our looming debt crisis. And President Obama's plan has been and is still more debt and no reform. And the American people have resoundingly rejected this idea. We have a recent poll out this morning, the Bloomberg poll, which says that the American people know they don't want a government shutdown, but they are tired of the debt, and they want to make sure that this president sits down and negotiates with us a resolution to this problem. So we call on the president now to sit down with us, Harry Reid, to sit down with us, and let's solve the problem. This plan of more debt and no reform is absolutely unacceptable. It's unacceptable to us, and it's unacceptable to the American people that we represent.
You know, it's kind of interesting. You read the stories of different things that different people do. America realizes that we're in a big crisis. I read a headline that the Speaker gets a phone call from the President. I first think that's a very positive thing that's going to happen. We're going to see movement. The President didn't call to say, let's work together. He just called to say, I will not negotiate. That's not the same message he gives to other world leaders. This is a time that, one, we're Americans first. The leader talked about the new poll that came out from Bloomberg. America's concerned about economic growth. They're concerned about the size of our debt. When you look at the bill that we will roll out when it comes to the debt ceiling, we take control of making sure that we don't continue just runaway spending. But more importantly, we bring growth back. Economic growth, that when you look at the Joint Economic Committee comes out, just 1% of growth will cut down more than $300 billion of debt just in 10 years. These are all bills that have passed this House before. But why haven't they come law? Why do we still linger in the economic problems that we have? Because the Senate will not act. Today, that can all change. We ask the President to call again. But this time, don't call to say you won't talk. Do exactly what the American people ask. Sit down and work together that we can get this country moving one more time.
Republicans are leading. We are leading on the issues important to this country. We are leading on those policies that will create jobs, get people back to work, get a strong economy. We're leading in an effort to get the government to live within its means, cut spending, get those spending reforms so that our fiscal situation is strong. We're leading on health care, on ensuring that Americans have access to quality and affordable health care. And we're leading on protecting hardworking Americans across this country that are feeling the overreach from the federal government. And what do we hear on the other side? Leader Pelosi has called us legislative arsonists. Mr. Van Hollen said the House Republicans are scaremongering on Obamacare. And President Obama accused us of holding the U.S. hostage. These accusations couldn't be further from the truth, and I encourage President Obama and the Democrats to listen to the 57% of Americans across this country who would oppose most or all of Obamacare because it's making their lives harder. I encourage them to sit down with the average family of four in America that is going to see their premiums increase $7,500 on average. I encourage them to talk to some of the people I represent in Washington State, moms and dads that are wondering how are they going to insure their kids, those seniors that can't find a doctor who will take a Medicare patient and are seeing their costs go up, or those people that are losing their full-time jobs because their employers can't afford Obamacare. This debate trumps politics in every way. It's about people. It's about everyday, hardworking people. And we encourage the Democrats to listen to the American people and then do what's right.
I'm a mom, and moms have to be really good at multitasking and making sure everyone's happy, everyone's heard and gets along, and to solve life's problems. That's the only way you can do it to avoid mass chaos in a home. And it's not easy, and this job that I'm doing today isn't easy either. I didn't come here to shut things down. I came here to get things done. And I don't want the president's health care law for my family, my mom, my kids. And neither does the majority of Americans, and certainly not the majority of Kansans. And I am going to continue to do everything in my power to repeal and replace the president's health care law. However, I also do not want the government to shut down. There are people across the country who depend on essential government services like Social Security, Medicare, and certainly the security provided by our nation's military, both here and abroad. The House is committed to keeping the federal government open in order to provide these very services. The House has listened to the American people who want the delay in the president's health care law and ensure the federal government remains open. We are leading the charge to rein in spending and protect hardworking Americans, and it's time for the Senate to join us to make this work.
Let's face it. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is not ready for prime time. Yet another broken promise. Premiums would go down by $2,500? Not the case. Many families, as they're beginning to look at these exchanges that perhaps open up as early as next week, are finding that their premiums are going to go up perhaps as much as 400%. Yet another broken promise, showing again that this is not ready for prime time.
This ought to be a blast. I call on you, Luke, but you need a haircut. Yes, ma'am.
I tried to get one
yes, ma'am.
yesterday. They were all booked up at the Russell Senate.
You sound like
you got a call. You got
you sound like my colleagues. The dog ate my homework. Yes, ma'am.
Got one. So, the last time there was a fight over the debt ceiling, the stock market dropped by 2,000 points, and U.S. credit was downgraded. Are you willing to risk that again? Are you truly willing to hold up the raising of the debt ceiling if you don't get some or all of the items on your list?
Listen, the problem is not what's happening or not happening here. The fact is we have $17 trillion worth of debt. This year, the federal government will bring in more revenue than any year in the history of our country, and yet we'll have a nearly $700 billion budget deficit. We have a spending problem that has to be addressed. In addition to that, we see almost no economic growth. If you really want to begin to solve this problem, we not only have to control spending, but we also have to have real economic growth that allows Americans better shot at a better job and better wages and more hours. Andrew.
If you don't get the items on your list.
Mr. Speaker, you just said spending is a problem. You say every time that spending is the issue. But on this debt limit bill, all you're offering are freebies like medical malpractice and some leftover low-hanging fruit from the super committee. Why aren't you doing more on spending?
In this bill, we have spending cuts and we have issues that will help spur more economic growth. We think the balance is correct.
Speaker Boehner, in light of bringing this debt limit bill to the floor, will you now accept a clean CR from the Senate to avoid a government shutdown?
I do not see that happening.
So the CR will have something attached to
If
it?
that's the case, what do you plan to send back to the Senate, and how can you ensure that there won't be a government shutdown?
I've made it clear now for months and months and months. We have no interest in seeing a government shutdown. But we've got to address the spending problems that we have in this town. And so there will be options available to us. There's not going to be any speculation about what we're going to do or not do until the Senate passes their bill. Thank you all.
Discuss the length in there. What the options would be for the CR.
We're not going to have a discussion about the CR and speculate about the CR until the Senate finishes their bill. All right, Jake, last one.
So you're not going to have a discussion about it, but I mean, and you don't intend to shut the government down.
That's correct.
It looks like a real possibility. Would you concede that that's the case at this point?
No, I do not. No, I do not expect that to happen.